Hi, something a little bit different in this video. What we've got here is a Nebra Helium cryptocurrency miner. And I'm hoping to repurpose it into a Meshcore repeater for long-range communications. So if you haven't heard of Meshcore before, what it is, it's like a network where you can send text messages, but it doesn't use any of the mobile phone infrastructure. So what it's handy for is if there's anything like a disaster or anything where the cell phone towers go down or anything like that, you can still communicate with other people and friends as long as they're in range of one of these nodes and you've got a suitable transmitter or receiver. So that's what the plan is. Now, I have seen somebody convert one of these to a similar system called Meshtastic, but I want to try and convert it to something called Meshcore. So I don't know whether anybody's actually done this before or not, but I want to try and do it for, I think I can probably do it for about a £5. So that's what I'm planning on doing with it anyway. So the first thing I want to do is remove this little subboard here, because I don't think we're going to need that. We're going to have to do some modifications for software as well as hardware. Now, when I first bought this didn't work at all. And what was up with it? I'll just zoom down a little bit. I'll just remove this little module here, which is a little Raspberry Pi Computer Module 3. So initially what was wrong with this was it had a eMMC chip here that stored the program for the thing to run. And that had failed. So what I had to do was shift some resistors here. I think that was one of them there. I had to shift that one from that position there to here and solder a few other ones on. I think I had to bridge these ones here. And then what that does, it allows the Raspberry Pi to use an external SD card. So I've got one here. Let's put that back in. So unfortunately, the long-range transmitter, this little module here, isn't suitable for Meshcore or Meshtastic, and that doesn't quite work for the application that we want to use it for. So I'm going to have to remove that as well, and we're going to have to try and replace it with another module that's going to go onto this connector here. So we're going to have to make some kind of board with the new module on, but then there's another little problem as well. This connector here, only the first 24 pins are used, and we need some of the extra pins over here which aren't connected. So we're going to have to put some jumper wires from these pins here, for instance, over to where the Raspberry Pi module is, which is over on this connector here. So we're going to have to take this whole board out and then do some patchwork underneath it. So I'll start by removing this little LoRa concentrator module. It should be a matter of doing this. And then it looks like we need to remove that plug there. I'm not sure whether there's any screws underneath this module. I'll just take this back out a sec. Just see if we can remove this whole board. Like so, because there's a screw underneath it. So it looks like we've got 4 screws that we need to remove. And that should allow us to get this board out. Like so. Right, I'm going to shift this bit out of the way then. So I've drawn a little diagram of the I/O pins that we need to connect from the Raspberry Pi module side over to where the expansion board plugs into. So what we've got pins 2 to 60 on this side, and I've labelled them up so if anybody else wants to do this. So this is pin 20, 22, 24, which I've labelled A, and that needs to go to this pin here, pin 26, which I've labelled B, needs to go to this pin here, and so forth. So let's get on with it then. So here's the two connectors here, and what I've done is I've put some Sharpie marker just on the pins here, so it's easier. Just instead of you having to count all the pins, you can just go, okay, so like 2, 10, 20, 30, and same here, so 10, 20, 30, you know that pin's 30, it's just easier to work it out. Right, I'll start soldering some wires up then. I'm just going to put some flux on these pins first that we're going to be soldering to, and add a bit fresh solder, and then we'll get the wires on. Just turn the board that way for now, just so it's easier to solder. I'll just zoom down a little bit as well. We need some on those two. Just checking I'm on the right pin here. Right, so I've got some of this thin Kynar wire here. Just going to trim that back a little bit. Right, I'm just going to spin this round and get the wires on easier. Right, so that's one done. Actually, I'll use this wire for the next one along because I've cut it a bit long. And then I'll do the wire on the other side. And this one needs to go to this side of the board. I'm just going to spin it round so it's easier to solder. So I want to be onto that pin there. Right, so that's what the completed board looks like. So I thought just before I put the board back in place, I'd put some hot glue on it just to secure the wires. Right. I'll just zoom out a bit. Let's get this board fitted back in. Right, we'll put this module back on here. Carefully line the pins up. Right, next thing we need to make a board that's going to connect onto this connector here now. So I'll just put this to one side for the moment. Now you can buy a proper Raspberry Pi hat that will fit on that connector. But because I don't want to order one of those and pay for one or whatever, I thought the cheapest way of doing it is going to be just to order one of these LoRa modules here. So this is one of the E-Byte E22 900M 30S modules. So I think these deliver up to 1 watt, but you can set the power for lower or up to 1 watt. So what my plan is just use some Vero board here and a couple of these strip things here, header connectors. Solder that onto there, sort of like that. And then we can use this as a breakout board and use some of these DuPont connectors, because I've got like a lot of Arduino stuff in anyway. We'll put some more, another row of headers either side, and then we can use that just to go from there to the actual header connector. And I think that should work fine. And then the only thing we've had to really buy is just the module itself. I've already had some Vero board lying around and these DuPont connectors anyway. And I think that makes it pretty much accessible for anybody who wants to do this, rather than having to get a proper board or anything. They can just order one of these little modules, which are about £5 from AliExpress, and then that's it, you're pretty much done. Right, so I'm going to solder one of these headers in place first. So I'm just going to get it a bit like that first. Let's put a blob of solder on one of the tracks, and then we'll just straighten it up. Now one thing we need to do so we don't short the module out is to just cut these tracks. Just move that out of the way because I think it's giving a bit glare at the camera. And if you haven't got one of these cutters, you can just use a drill bit. Right, that looks okay. We'll get the other row of pins in. Again, I'm just going to solder one and then straighten it up. I'm just going to check that the module actually fits okay. And it doesn't, so I might have to just move it very slightly. Now if I put this in the wrong place or something. No, that's it. Right, I'll just solder the other side up for now. Right, and the next thing will actually be to solder the module up itself. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to move it slightly higher up. Just add a bit solder to that pin there. And then hopefully do the same on this side. Oh, I think I quite had that. Right, that's one side done. I'll just do this side. Right, I think that looks okay. So I've got some of these header strips here now. And what we can do is pretty much just solder those on like that. And then we can use that to connect our wires to. Now one thing it does recommend is putting a capacitor across the ground and VCC pins. So I'm just going to have a look, see if I can find a couple of capacitors for that. So I've just soldered a 100 microfarad 10 volt capacitor across the ground and VCC wires here. There's another module that I've got as well, you can just see there. Ground and VCC are on those two pins there, and they're actually connected together internally. Maybe you just see there on the end of the cancellation there that those two pins are actually joined together. And it's the same with all the ground pins. And so if you notice all the grounds are all just connected to this ground plane there. You might be able to see there on the antenna one. So all of the grounds are connected internally as well. Right, we just need to wire it up now to the header connector on the actual Nebra unit. Well, I've just finished wiring up the module here, just to the header connector here. And what I'll do, because it's a bit hard to see what wires go where, I'll draw a little diagram which I'll pull up on the screen so you can have a look to see exactly how it's wired up. So if you want to make one of these yourself, you can obviously do it quite easily. Now one thing that I'm going to have to order, which I haven't got, is a USB sort of extension lead with a right angled plug on it. Because the original Wi-Fi adapter was plugged into this little subboard here, which we've now removed. And that's a mini or micro USB. So I can't plug that into that. So what I've done is I've ordered a right angled USB male to female. So then I can just pop this little Wi-Fi adapter down here somewhere and just plug it in to the sockets here. But at the moment, I'll just have to plug it in like that. So I think the next thing that we need to do is look at the software. So I'll get this bit out of the way and then we'll jump over to the computer screen. I've got the micro SD card inserted in a micro SD card reader here. So what we'll do is we'll jump over to the computer screen and then we'll start downloading some software. So the first thing that we're going to need to download is Raspberry Pi Imager. So let's just download that. And we'll just save it. It shouldn't take long to download. So we'll just run that now. And just wait for that to install. Right, let's launch it. So because I'm using a Raspberry Pi 3 computing module that's in the Nebra, we'll select Raspberry Pi 3. We're going to next. And then we've got a few different operating systems we can select. So we don't want the full Pi desktop because there's no monitor or anything connected to here. So we're going to go to Raspberry Pi Other. And we're going to select Raspberry Pi OS Lite 64-bit with no desktop environment. So we'll just select that one. We'll go next. And it's picked up the SD card here. So we'll just select that one. I'll just leave that as Meshcore. Next. And we've already set those up, so next. And for the username, I'm going to type in mesh. And I'm just going to do the same for the password. Just go next on that. Now I've already set this up before, which is why it's already got some of the details already filled in, so you just enter your network access point name and password, and we'll just do next. And I'm just going to use password authentication for SSH, so I've got that enabled. I'm just going to next. I'm not going to use that. And that's pretty much it. We'll just hit write now, and what it should do, it'll erase everything that's on the card, so make sure that if you need anything from this card, you've backed it up first. So we'll just say understand and write. And it should start downloading the image if you haven't already previously downloaded, and it'll start writing it to the card as it's doing now. So we'll just wait for that to complete. I seem to have an error, so I'm not sure whether this SD card's actually okay or not. I might have to get a different SD card. Right, back with a different SD card, so we'll give this one a go. So I'm just going to select it here. I'll just hit next. And we should just be able to go through everything because we've already got it saved. So we'll hit write. And hopefully it works this time. Well, it looks like it's written it and it's verifying it now, so hopefully it passes this time. So there we go, that seems to have completed successfully. So we'll just hit finish, and now we should just be able to remove the SD card. I'm just going to remove the SD card reader and get the laptop out of the way. I'll just get the Nebra back on the bench here. I'm just going to remove the little Raspberry Pi module. I'll just pop the SD card in. I'll just pop the module back in here. It's just easier to pop the SD card in when the module's not in the way. And I've got a power over Ethernet lead here that's connected to a little power supply here. So we'll just plug this in and hopefully we don't get any smoke. Right, we've got some lights. So this might take a little bit to boot up with it being a first boot. So this blue light might flash quite a few times first. And then what we'll do is we'll go back to the computer screen and we'll SSH into the software and set up the rest of the software that we need to set up. Right, I'll go and get the laptop. So the first thing we need to do is find out what IP address our Raspberry Pi is actually on. So I'm going to go into my router here and I'm going to view the list of connected devices. And here we've got Meshcore, which is what we call the Raspberry Pi. And the IP address on my network is 10.0.0.136. So I'm going to run a program called Putty that I've already downloaded before. And what we can do with that is we can SSH, it's called, into the Raspberry Pi. And that gives us a command line where we can type commands to it. So we're going to type in there 10.0.0.136, which is the IP address, and we'll just go open. And it's just saying potential security breach. We'll just say yes to that. And we've got a login prompt now. So this login prompt here, we're going to type in mesh, because that's what we set the username up as earlier. And we set the password as mesh2, but you can set it up to whatever you want. And we're logged in. So the next thing we need to do now is start installing the software that's going to actually act as the repeater. So we need to go to GitHub here. And there's a site called GitHub Write Up PYMC Repeater. And there's instructions on here how to install it. So if we just scroll down a bit, the first thing we need to do is enable SPI on the actual Raspberry Pi. So we'll just copy this command here. We'll just do copy. Let's go back to Putty and we'll just hit right mouse button and that'll paste it in. We'll just hit enter. And if we go to interface options here, and then SPI, just use the arrow keys, hit enter, and then it'll say, would you like the SPI interface to be enabled? So we'll just press the left arrow key. I'm going to yes, press enter again, and just press enter again. Then if we press the tab key, we can go on to finish and just press enter. And then we'll just type sudo reboot. Now we'll have to give this a moment just to reboot. It might take a minute or so. So after waiting about a minute, I'll just hit OK. Then if we go to this top bar here, if we right click, we can just go down to restart session, and what that'll do is it'll just reconnect or try to reconnect. So we'll see if it's booted up yet. And there we go, we'll log in again. So we'll type in the username, which we had as mesh, password mesh, and we're logged in again. So now if we copy and paste this next command here, and just right click, hit enter, we should see these two devices here now, this SPI dev 0.0 and SPI dev 0.1, and that means that the SPI is enabled. So if we just scroll down a little bit more, we've got a couple of more commands here. So we'll just copy that one and paste it in. And this will update a few of the packages on the Raspberry Pi. And it might take a couple of minutes. So we'll just leave that to do its thing. And you might see lots of text and that and stuff flying past. And there we go, that's been upgraded. And then the next thing we need to do is install Git, which allows us to install the software. So we'll just copy that, paste in that command. And this might take a few moments as well. Okay. And we'll just go down to the next command here. And what this does, it'll actually start copying the software that we need for the repeater onto the Raspberry Pi. That's that bit done. Now we'll just change directory just to where the software is. And then we'll run this command here. Which will let us configure the software. So the first thing we want to do is actually install the rest of the software. So we'll just hit enter on the install here. And I'll say OK. And we'll just leave that to do its thing. Right, so the next thing it wants us to do is give a name to the repeater. So I'm going to call this one Nebra Meshcore repeater. We'll just hit enter. Now we've got a few different options of what hardware we're actually using. So because this module is wired up as a mesh adv, we're going to choose number 6. So I'm just going to press 6, and if you want to alter the power levels and things, you can actually alter the config file manually. So we'll just hit 6 for now and just hit enter. And then I'll ask what band or what area that we're actually using. So we're in the UK and we're going to be using narrow band. So we'll just select number 5, press enter. And it's already set our radio config up for us. Okie doke. So we'll just hit enter again. And then we can go down to exit at the bottom. So that should be our repeater up and running. So it's got a nice web interface, so let's go and have a look at that. So our IP address, I think, was 10.0.0.136. So at the top here in the browser, I'm just going to type 10.0.0.136, then a colon, and then 8,000. So we'll just hit enter now. And we've got a nice web interface here. So we can see we haven't received any packets, we haven't forwarded any packets, and the uptime is 0 minutes, because it's, well, 1 minute now, because it's a fresh install. And we've got a few different options like statistics or neighbours, which will show us any neighbouring nodes or whatever. We've got things like system stats, configuration. Now this just lets you view the configuration. You've actually got to modify the configuration with the command line if you want to actually alter it at the moment. And we've got things like logs and that and stuff as well. So I'll go and grab my mobile phone, and then what we'll do is we'll send a message and we'll see if the repeater actually forwards the packets. Right, I'll just go back to the dashboard there. Now I'll just go and grab my mobile. Right, so what I've got here is a little Heltec V2 module that I'm going to use to interface my phone from Bluetooth to the Meshcore network via this little module here. And I've already flashed it with Meshcore, so I'll just connect that in. Just plug that in there. And there you go, you can see the Meshcore logo just pop up. Right, so I've got Meshcore running on my phone here. So I'm just going to go into this public channel there. I'll just type in hi. And it says heard one repeat. If you can just see that there. And if we look at our laptop screen, we can see there we've received one packet and we've forwarded one. So if I go back to here and hit broadcast, I'll see if the repeater picks it up, and it has. Let's just try that again. So there we go. So we've received 3 packets and we've forwarded 3. So it appears that our repeater is working. Now if I click on send advert here, let's see if my mobile phone will actually receive it. And there we go. I've just received that on my phone from the repeater. So excellent. So that means it's all working. So there we go then, how to convert a Nebra miner into a Meshcore repeater. Right then, if you enjoy this video, please give it the thumbs up. If you want to see more like it, please subscribe. Any comments or questions, please leave it in the comment section below. And as always, have a great day. Thanks for watching.